More than 2,000 years ago, the soil of a German forest soaked with the blood of 20,000 Roman soldiers. What began as a secure march towards conquest ended in a deadly trap that shook the very foundations of the Roman Empire. A defeat so devastating, it changed the course of European history forever. A German leader, raised among the Romans, betrayed his own army, leading them into a fatal ambush. How could it happen that the most powerful war machine in the world fell before a much smaller army? What secrets did this forest hide, and what lessons did it leave for humanity? Today, we uncover the secret behind the Battle of Teutoburg, the defeat that Rome never forgot, but also could never avenge. If you were surprised by how one battle could change the history of Europe, don't forget to like, share this video, and subscribe for more epic stories that will make you see history in a completely new way. It was a grey, cold morning, as if the sky itself had covered itself with shadows to witness the start of a tragedy. In the heart of a German forest, where the tree branches intertwined like clawed fingers, an unstoppable army was about to fall. The Roman legions, known for their strength and discipline, advanced, confident that their victory would be just a matter of time. But something was wrong. The ground beneath their feet seemed to hide dark secrets, and the air was dense, laden with foreboding. The story of the Battle of Teutoburg does not begin with the fight, but with the deception. The story begins with the promise of an ally and ends in the most brutal of betrayals. The Roman Empire, whose might had shattered empires and subdued peoples, fell into a deadly trap that would forever change the course of Europe. The sun barely touched the treetops when the forces of Rome, confident and arrogant, advanced along the narrow path cutting through the dense forest. Among the ranks, the Roman eagles gleamed like symbols of the empire's unstoppable power. But what no one knew was that deep within the darkness, a much more astute and dangerous war was being waged. The key to the defeat wasn't the enemy everyone expected. It wasn't the primitive barbarians Rome had easily crushed in the past. This time, the enemy was much more dangerous. This time, the enemy knew the darkest secrets of Rome. The enemy, one of Rome's own sons, had been raised in its fields and trained with its weapons. Arminius, a young German leader who had been educated among the Romans, had served with loyalty in their ranks. His knowledge of Roman tactics, customs, and above all Roman weaknesses made him almost invincible. He had been adopted as a son of Rome, but his heart beat for his people, for his tribe. And in the shadows of the night, when the lights of the city seemed distant, Arminius made the decision that would change the fate of his people. In the dark corners of Arminius's soul, loyalty to Rome was replaced by a burning flame of vengeance. He knew that to defeat Rome, he needed to be more cunning than its generals, more skillful than its legions. So, instead of fighting alongside the Romans, he decided to do it against them. The plan was clear: destroy them from within. The great trap was set. What followed was a series of meticulously calculated moves. Arminius, gaining the trust of the Roman commander Publius Quinctilius Varus, skillfully manipulated the Romans. He offered them information about a distant rebellion, a rebellion that never existed. With a gleam in his eyes and promises of victory, Arminius convinced Varus that his army should march through the Teutoburg forest, a territory considered safe and allied. Unbeknownst to them, Varus and his 20,000 soldiers were marching toward their annihilation. The Romans advanced through the forest, unaware that the ground beneath their feet was about to become their tomb. The trees, like silent sentinels, watched the procession of legions, each step bringing them closer to death. Germanic arrows, prepared in the shadows, waited for the perfect moment to strike. Teutoburg was not just a forest, it was a death trap, where nature itself conspired against the Romans. As they marched along narrow paths, the air became heavy with the scent of damp earth, a cold air that froze the bones. With every step, Rome walked deeper into a trap it could no longer avoid. And then, when the third day of the march arrived, the ambush began. The first shots were like a sonic explosion. Arrows and javelins launched from the trees fell upon the Roman legions, catching the soldiers off guard, unable to form their battle lines in time. Chaos erupted like an unexpected storm. The Romans, accustomed to fighting in open fields, could not defend themselves against such a stealthy and deadly attack. The ground became a frantic battlefield. The mud trapped soldiers, their shields, once symbols of defense, now turned heavy and treacherous. Roman weapons designed for ordered combat became useless in this environment, and chaos reigned as the sound of battle mixed with screams of despair. What the Romans did not expect was that the Germans, moving quickly between the trees and using their knowledge of the terrain, attacked from all directions. Arminius had prepared. The ground cut off the escape routes and blocked the paths to shelter. The trap closed. There was no salvation. The Roman troops, trapped in a forest of shadows, could not organize. Rome, the most perfect war machine in history, was defeated by cunning, terrain, and a man who knew his own fragility. As the sun set and the night covered the battlefield, the Romans fell like pieces on a board. Some tried to flee, but the Germans hunted them like beasts. Others, seeing the magnitude of the defeat, surrendered, only to be brutally murdered or tortured in merciless rituals. There was no mercy among the Germans, nor among the men who had once been allies of Rome. The last remnants of Roman organization crumbled. The battlefield was covered with fallen bodies, broken weapons, warriors who had known glory but now faced death without honor. Rome, which had conquered entire empires, fell under the claws of an enemy who knew no mercy. In the darkness of the night, Varus, the Roman commander, understood the magnitude of his mistake. Standing among the bodies of his men, watching his army disintegrate around him, he realized that the history he had known had come to an end. Varus, seeing that defeat was inevitable, made the final decision: suicide. But he was not the only one. His officers, facing a fate worse than death in battle, chose the same path. Rome's dignity had vanished that night. When the news of the defeat reached Rome, the shock was complete. Not only because of the magnitude of the loss of life, but because of the humiliation it represented for an empire that considered itself invincible. Emperor Augustus, upon receiving the news, was plunged into deep disarray. The echoes of his cry, "Give me back my legions," resonated throughout the city, marking the start of an era of changes. Rome, which had swept everything in its path, now had to face its own fragility. The Rhine frontier became a line of defense, not expansion. Rome no longer looked north with ambition, it now saw Germania as a threat. After the defeat at Teutoburg, Rome was never the same again. Rumors of the humiliation of the legions reached every corner of the empire, from the hot coasts of Hispania to the banks of the Nile in Egypt. For the Romans, victory had always been a certainty. But now, with the cold sweat of defeat, they began to question whether they were truly invincible. The psychological impact of the defeat was so great that Rome was forced to change its strategic focus. Imperial arrogance, which had fueled its boundless expansion, began to yield to the need to protect what it had already conquered. Teutoburg was not just a battle, it was the beginning of Rome's fragility. The humiliation of losing 3 complete legions and their war eagles, sacred symbols of Roman power, was a loss beyond the physical. The eagles were not just standards, they were the very representation of the soul of the empire. For the Romans, losing them was losing their honor. The Roman eagles, those golden standards representing the glory of the empire, were taken by the Germans, who not only destroyed them, but used them as trophies, symbols of Roman humiliation. Each fallen eagle was a reminder that even the gods were not invincible. Arminius, the man who had led Rome to its most humiliating defeat, became a legendary figure among the Germanic tribes. After the battle, he was not only a leader but a symbol of resistance, of fighting against oppression and foreign rule. For the Germans, he was the hero who had restored the independence of their land. Arminius was not just a military leader, he was the embodiment of Germanic resistance. His victory not only stopped Roman expansion, but marked the beginning of the construction of a Germanic national identity. The fight of his people had found a champion, a man who had defeated the gods of Rome. But Arminius's triumph was not eternal. Although his victory over Rome secured him a place in history, he could not prevent the internal conflicts that arose among the Germanic tribes. The Germans, as much as they celebrated their independence, were not united under one banner. The tribes, with their own loyalties and rivalries, could not maintain lasting unity, and over time Arminius himself became trapped in internal tensions. Despite the glory, Arminius could not escape the demons that torment great leaders. After the victory, the Germanic tribes, instead of uniting under his leadership, began to fracture. Arminius, the man who had defeated Rome, fell victim to the internal divisions. Even those who once called him a hero betrayed him. But his legacy endured, even centuries after his death. In the 19th century, when Germany sought a unified national identity, Arminius resurfaced as a symbol of Germanic freedom. A colossal monument in his honor was erected in the Teutoburg forest, a place now marked as the site of the most important victory in the history of Germania. Arminius's sacrifice, his victory over Rome, became an eternal symbol for the Germans, especially when, centuries later, the monument to his memory was erected in the 19th century. In times of war and national unity, Arminius was remembered as the liberator who defeated the giants of Rome. Rome, for its part, never forgot Teutoburg. Over the following decades, several punitive expeditions to Germania were organized with the goal of avenging the humiliations suffered. But Rome never regained full control of the region. Each attempt was more failed than the last. Rome, wounded in its pride, sent its legions time and again to the Germanic lands. But the memory of Teutoburg was always a weight on its shoulders. The Roman legions could not march into Germany as they had in other parts of the world. The Germanic people, now strengthened by their victory, stood firm. Although the Roman forces managed to recover 2 of the 3 lost eagles from Teutoburg, the psychological and strategic damage had already been done. The Rhine frontier became an impassable wall. Rome could no longer expand beyond that line, and the region of Germania remained independent for the most part until the arrival of the medieval times. The Battle of Teutoburg left an indelible mark on history. Not only did it prevent Roman expansion in northern Europe, but it also left a psychological imprint on the Romans themselves. The defeat changed the way Rome viewed war, invasion, and, most importantly, the peoples it had once considered inferior. Despite the Romans' efforts to regain their honor, they never managed to establish lasting control over Germania. The Battle of Teutoburg made it clear that even for the greatest empire in the world, there were limits. Roman arrogance, that blind confidence in their invincibility, had been the cause of their downfall. Rome would never fully learn the lesson. Expansion and conquest were always their ambition, but Teutoburg showed that no matter how large an empire is, there is always a people willing to resist. And so, Rome withdrew behind the Rhine, accepting its defeat and its fragility. The defeat at Teutoburg not only changed the course of Roman history, but it also laid the groundwork for the changes that would unfold in Europe over the following centuries. The Germanic tribes, freed from the pressure of Rome, began to form the kingdoms that would eventually give rise to what we now know as modern Europe. Rome withdrew, but the echo of its defeat resonated through the centuries. The Germanic tribes, now free, began to forge their own destiny. And from their victory at Teutoburg came the seed of a new Europe, one that was not destined to be ruled by Rome. Today, the site of the Teutoburg battle is a place of remembrance and reflection. The forest that once witnessed the massacre of the Roman legions has become a symbol of the struggle for freedom and resistance. The remains of fallen Roman soldiers have been unearthed, revealing artifacts that tell the story of the battle. And although empires fall, the lessons of Teutoburg remain relevant in the modern world. The story of Teutoburg is not just the story of an ancient conflict. It is a reminder that, no matter how great an empire is, there will always be forces that challenge its authority. Teutoburg reminds us that resistance, cunning, and unity of a people can change the course of history. The Battle of Teutoburg not only left scars in Roman history, but also reminds us that even the greatest empires have their moments of fragility. The lessons of Teutoburg remain relevant today, a testament that we should never underestimate the power of resistance and cunning. And now the question is, what do you think about this epic defeat? What are your thoughts on the legacy of Arminius and the lesson Rome leaves us? If you were surprised by everything you saw, don't forget to give this video a like. subscribe to the channel for more stories that will make you see history in a completely new way, and most importantly, share it with a friend. Let us know in the comments what part of the Teutoburg story impacted you the most, or if you have any doubts about what really happened. We want to hear your opinion, and don't miss the upcoming videos. See you in the next video, where we'll bring more secrets of history that you won't want to miss.